It's 3 a.m., and the Thompson house is cloaked in darkness, save for the dim glow of a street lamp. Sleeping through the curtains, Bob Thompson, an ordinary man with a penchant for routine, sleeps soundly, unaware of the disturbances making his way through his home. Enter Max, a figure shrouded in paranoia, driven not by malice, but by an overwhelming compulsion to unsettle. Max's plan is not to steal, but to disrupt, to inflict discomfort in the most insidious ways possible. With trembling hands, he sets his plan into motion. First stop, the kitchen. Max, barely breathing, replaces Bob's high-end coffee grounds that would make even the best of coffee shops seem like terrible coffee, with a mixture of instant and powdered cocoa. It's a subtle change, but enough to unsettle the next morning. The next morning, Bob stumbles into the kitchen still groggy. The first sip of his coffee brings confusion, strange sweetness. Not the bitterness he's accustomed to, though. The unsettling taste triggers an uneasy feeling he can't quite place. Max's next act of terror, though, is more direct. He slinks into the bathroom like a slippery snake. His shadow elongates as he replaces Bob's toothpaste with a generous dollop of wasabi. The tube, now transformed, waits for its unsuspecting victim. Bob, the next morning, seeking solace from his morning routine, after his interesting cup of coffee, applies what he believes to be a fresh layer of mint on his morning toothbrush. As he starts vigorously brushing his mouth, expecting nothing to be any of the different, the fiery wasabi burns with an intense that jolts him awake, leaving him gasping for breath and looking around, questioning his sanity, wondering what could have possibly happened the night before. Now, in the bedroom, Max's final act of invasion, definitely the most bold of everything, involves his remote control. He removes the batteries with careful precision, ensuring that when Bob attempts to escape the disorienting morning chaos by watching TV, he finds nothing but static. Bob, now fully awake, disoriented, wrestling with the remote, the TV flickers with ominous static on the highest possible volume setting, adding to the growing sense of dread. All of these inconveniences crescending on top of each other, leaving Bob on the edge. Now, the pièce de résistance. Max, in a single act, placed a posted note on the front door that read, "You've been pranked. Enjoy your day. I'll see you at the shop later on. Good luck figuring out who I was." What? What was that? As Bob opens the door to confront the source of his torment, he is met with no one but the morning chill and the haunting knowledge that somebody has been watching him. Somebody at his own shop has found a way into his house. Max, consumed by his own fear, hides in the shadow while at work, his heart racing, the fear of being discovered now palpable. Do I let him know, or do I just hide out and keep everything under wraps? But his guilt is starting to sink in. Maybe he shouldn't have done that. Maybe he went a little bit too far. And so, the Thompson household became a place where the mundane met the unsettling for one morning. A reminder that sometimes the most chilling intrusions aren't there to hurt you, but there to have fun. Still wise to be careful, though. Welcome to Scary Stories with Sai. Pascagoula, Mississippi. A town with a current population of 21,650. Now, town bustling with life. Everyone rummaging about, making their way to their different places and talking to each other, most blissfully unaware of their dark, albeit strange, piece of history of their own town. The year was 1942 in Pascagoula, inside of Jackson County, where people were enjoying the newest Disney movie, Bambi, and the new White Christmas by Bing Crosby had just hit the market on nearly every radio that winter. Now, World War II was more so coming to an end, not that anyone knew that yet. The war wouldn't officially be over for another 3 years. But in the dead of night, residents were asked to cover up their windows to block out the lights of possible bombers flying overhead. One person, though, took advantage of this situation and became the Phantom Barber of Pascagoula. Which, I'm sorry, Pascagoula? With a name like that, what were you expecting? Now, Pascagoula was most known at this time for being a shipyard. In June of 1942, residents were worrying about possible visits from the barber, however. Normally, something that you plan out in advance, a lot of people are excited for, children are terrified of and think that their hair is falling out, but not normally something that you're scared of happening to you in the middle of the night. But whispers of a nocturnal intruder began to spread as strange and unsettling attacks started to occur. This, though, was not your typical prowler. No money was ever taken. Everything that was there at the time of the attack was there when he had left. All except for maybe some hair. But this was no harmless prank. The Phantom Barber's mystery quickly turned into a chilling enigma. So, join me. Let's see where this part of the road leads. The first victim was a young woman named Mary Briggs. On a June night, while the night sky was dark and warm, Mary slept in her family's house. But she woke to a very unsettling discovery. She had lost some hair that night. Someone broke into her house and clearly cut very carefully some of her hair and then slipped out without ever being noticed. This was baffling. Like, even though this wasn't the time period of like home detection systems and everything like that, people didn't just break into people's houses. And even when they did, they took something for their time. Like, what was he getting out of some hair? I mean, I guess I probably don't want to ask that question. But still, she wasn't alone. Over the upcoming weeks, more and more and more girls specifically reported similar encounters. They would wake up in their room. Everything was perfectly fine, except for the window was open. There was a there was a cold breeze, and some of their hair was gone. The police were baffled. There were no clues, no sign of struggles, no fingerprints, just nothing to connect any kind of possible criminal to this situation. All they had to go off of was an open window and some strands of hair, which they already knew where the hair was connected to, so nowhere to go. As the snippings continued, so did the sense of unease throughout the community. Who was this barber? And why was he only targeting the town's young women? Pascagoula residents started taking matters into their own hands, installing extra locks and keeping weapons at their bedside tables. In short, the community and the women in whole were sleeping with one eye open. Night watchmen would be patrolling the streets and trying to keep an eye out for anybody breaking in. Like, the entire town banded together to try to find this person. Fear was thick in the humid Gulf air, and the town's night watchmen all patrolled the streets in hopes of finding their slinky barber. But then, everything takes a darker turn. On June 13th, Mr. and Mrs. Heidelberg, an elderly couple, which I was unable to find any confirmation saying that there was any younger women living in this house. So this elderly couple were brutally attacked in their own home. This time, it wasn't just hair taken. The barber had taken an iron pipe and bludgeoned them, leaving them both critically injured. Now, was this just an accident, or had the barber gone bloodthirsty? I personally think that with the fact that there was all of the victims that had been unscathed and hadn't had anything stolen from them and didn't even know the barber's presence were all young women. And then suddenly somebody falls out of the category for who the barber is going after, and now they're brutally attacked and both hospitalized. This sounds to me like this wasn't his intentions, or their intentions. I keep saying he. This wasn't their intentions. The barber was upset that they didn't find who they were actually looking for, and possibly Mr. and Mrs. Heidelberger were awake at the time, and he was almost caught, so he had to intervene. Now, ultimately, they claimed that they didn't see anything after they had recovered. Police were now desperate, though. They had no way of knowing whether or not this was a one-and-done incident, or had the Phantom Barber suddenly become aggressive. Investigators combed through every lead they could find, every dark alley they could search, and after a few weeks, they arrested somebody. A man by the name of William Dolan, a chemist with a less than reputable past, was accused of being the Phantom Barber after he was found with a collection of different types of hair, obviously from different people. An odd crime. Like, This entire situation feels sexual, in my opinion. Like, I understand there is no sexual components to this, but it's where my brain just keeps going. I keep thinking about why anybody would do this, and that's just where my brain keeps going. But this isn't where the story ends. It's actually where it gets a little bit more confusing. Dolan is convicted. He is seen in front of a jury of his peers and is convicted for being the Phantom Barber. But one big problem. People are still being attacked. Each night, well, not each night, but very frequently, the Phantom Barber was still breaking into people's houses. It seems like he was still roaming the streets, slipping into houses and leaving with their hair, completely unhurt. Now, to this day, many people believe the wrong man was in prison. Dolan was sentenced to 10 years in prison for a crime that many people believe that he may not have even committed. If Dolan had committed the crimes, why were there still being people attacked? Now, that's where this theory comes in. There's a theory behind from back in the old Salem witch trials day, where it's kind of like the newer fear of missing out kind of concept, where in the Salem witch trials, the first girl was attacked, and then after she publicly came out saying that she was attacked, it evolved, and more people were getting attacked, and people were accusing neighbors, and more people were getting thrown in jails and hanged, and it was crazy. But ultimately, most of it was proven to be lies. So it's debatable whether or not that happened here. After the first girl had her hair taken, Mary, back earlier on in the story, and then how many of these other people were legitimate cases and how many of these people were people trying to jump onto the story. Regardless, Dolan was actually eventually released from prison early in 1951 for essentially lack of evidence. He passed a lie detector test and with all of the different specifications, the fact that the lack of evidence whenever he was convicted, the fact that the crime continued happening afterwards, the pass of the lie detector test, he was let go. Now that doesn't exactly change one big problem. Ultimately, the real Phantom Barber was likely never caught, and may to this day be walking around Pascagoula. Now, this was a long time ago, but if he was the right age, it's not impossible for this person to still be alive. But what makes the Phantom Barber's tale so chilling isn't the crime itself, but everything behind it. How did they break into so many houses without getting caught? I mean, they had an entire multiple pretty much police forces, one actual police force and several community-made police forces going around trying to catch this person, and nobody ever did. So why'd he stop? Unless, of course, they did find him. But that's all just speculation. Maybe one day, another lock of hair will find up, and another open window. So, maybe tonight, maybe leave yours locked up tonight. Just in case. Thanks for joining me on this spine-chilling tale through history. Now keep your lights on. And remember, the scariest stories are often the ones that are true. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared.